I'm happy to be here with you virtually if I couldn't be personally today. I was really looking forward to experiencing a bit of Jerusalem with you and Jerusalem and Israeli rooftops. What I'd like to do is present our project here in San Francisco, a climate that has a little more moisture than most of Israel, but still a Mediterranean climate where we've developed a project, SALESFORCE Park, that's really a community space in the center of San Francisco. I'm a partner at PWP Landscape Architecture in San Francisco, and we do work around the world. What we try to do is make landscape of our urban topographies in cities and semi-rural areas across the country in the US, but also around the world, and these are some of our projects. What we try to do is create places that stick in your memory and establish a shared space and shared identity for the people that live there. And this has been through the last 3 or 4 decades as a firm, but more recently, we've been working at increasing scale and complexity and more with a focus on living systems. What we also challenge ourselves to do is to make great civic landscapes and gardens that last through time by making each of them fitted to their environments and to their cultures. And this is difficult because we have to learn about the environment and the culture in each of the places where we work. We do that by making places that engage their context using the materials and systems of our world, from the living elements, the animals, the vegetables, as well as the minerals, the social aspects, the ecological aspects, and aspects of time. And we do that from one studio together collaboratively in Berkeley, California, and this is an image of that place, and also working with actual materials, with spaces, and with different people of different ages. And you can see Peter Walker on the upper left, as well as our canine associate Bootsy on the table. And I think what we try to do is really think about the landscapes that we make through time. And because Pete's been working for 50 or 60 years in landscape architecture, and we have people of all ages below that, what we're able to do is think about different people's perspectives, different user groups, but also we've all been watching landscapes change and mature over time. And we bring that knowledge of how landscapes change to the work that we do each day. And so we even did that when we've approached SALESFORCE Park, which is what we'll be talking about today, a living landscape in the sky. Thinking about it as a technological endeavor, a park on a roof, but also an integral part of a new part of San Francisco as it's been developing over the years. So in the 1930s, the transit center and the Transbay Terminal was quite a lively place, with people taking light rail and trains from the station quite regularly. But over time, it became defunct and was really in disrepair in the 21st century. And so the idea of creating a new terminal, one that would be not only the bus depot, but also the future home of high-speed rail in California, was devised, and a design competition was held in 2007. And it was to focus on this site here, which was the area south of Market called the Transbay neighborhood, which was expected to become the extension of downtown. The high rises that you see at the top of the image were going to, with city planning's recommendations, continue developing south of Mission Street so that this entire area would become part of the high-rise portion of San Francisco downtown. What was also planned was that these parking lots that you see at the lower end, which ended up becoming parking spaces because there was a freeway, a viaduct, an elevated concrete freeway that ran through this area, which came down in an earthquake in 1989. These parking lot spaces are available and became available for redevelopment and for high-rise development. And so the real estate sales and the revenue from these spaces, which were city and state properties, would then fund the redevelopment and the construction of the new Transbay Terminal. So in addition to those spaces, some of the existing elevated roads, which brought buses from the Bay Bridge to the Transbay Terminal, were also going to be taken down and rebuilt in smaller footprints so that more land could then become available for development. And that development then, like I said, was meant to fund the development of this new building. You can see on this image on the upper right, in red is the original Transbay bus terminal ramp route in red, and the terminal shown as a rectangle at the top. That entire concrete ramp was demolished and proposed to be demolished as part of the new concept, so that all of these areas in blue in the lower left could then be developed as real estate sites, because these are the zones where the ramp existed that it would no longer be. And so that set of development sites were intended to be mixed use, residential, office, and retail spaces, so that downtown San Francisco could grow south of Market here and become an entirely new integrated neighborhood. And you can see here that the redevelopment area then would comprise all different kinds of uses. This was the planning document from December 2008 that showed how these spaces and areas would be redeveloped. And that had been under planning for years. What's happened there in the Transbay neighborhood is that all of these blue buildings, these high rises, have developed and been built or are in construction right now around the new SALESFORCE Park site and SALESFORCE Transit Center site since we began the competition, since 2007. And when we began the competition, we and San Francisco authorities thought that this kind of development would take about 20 to 30 years, but all of these buildings came up within about 10 to 12 years. And so the concept that we had in the competition was to make this new transit center more than a transit center, more than a hub of transportation and a bit of city infrastructure, but actually the center of this new high-rise neighborhood by making it a park. And the reason that we proposed that it could be a rooftop park was because when we looked at the site in the competition early on, we found that that site, this long green rectangle, was bigger than any of the open spaces, the public open spaces that are in the area already. So Union Square, which is above Market Street, which is this diagonal line, is 2.4 acres. Yerba Buena Gardens, which is a few blocks down from the site, was 2.2 acres. And South Park, which is a few more blocks away, was only 0.8 acres. And these are all of the green spaces or public plazas, the largest ones that are in the neighborhood. If you added all of those spaces up together, you got the area and the size of our site, which is about 5 acres or 5.5 acres. And for that reason, we proposed making the roof, which in the competition documents was shown like this. This image is a concept drawing that was meant to suggest that the transit center could have a special roof, like a glass roof. We proposed that instead of a glass roof, that roof could be a living roof, one that not only holds and receives and detains stormwater, but that could actually be a fully occupiable, livable space for the neighborhood. As a design team, we and the architects, Pelley Clark Pelley and Adamson Architects, as well as the engineers, environmental engineers, Atelier 10, structural engineers, and civil engineers from Arup and Bureau Happold, all worked together to come up with a proposal that we thought would create a building and landscape that together could do things for the neighborhood rather than create a space for a use that would bring the neighborhood down. And so we aimed to make a landscape on the building that would collect stormwater, that could help cool the building, that could also absorb some of the carbon that was released by the buses and other transit elements that were inside. What we also, we're building this for and designing this for is to receive high-speed rail, which would be the terminus station, the final station on the route from Southern California, Los Angeles, and Orange County up to San Francisco one day when the high-speed rail line gets built. And so what we really tried to do was make this new park the center of this new neighborhood. And here you can see that idea of this high-rise neighborhood with tall buildings growing up of a variety of uses. This is a residential tower. This is the SALESFORCE Tower, which was part of our competition proposal, which is an office building. This is an office building as well as another, and then residential towers here on the south side that you don't see in this image. And that this new 1 block wide, 4 block long, 5.5 acre rooftop park would knit this space together, going over streets that run underneath it. Early on, we knew that developing a park on a roof, 70 feet above the ground, is something that might be difficult to populate. People might not know that that's a public space up there. And we also were concerned that we might get criticism for developing or proposing a public space above. And so what we also proposed in the competition, and this was an image that was done as part of the competition proposal, was that programming, active programming would be part of the concept of the park, where the park managers would create a program of events and things to engage people that would draw them up there at different times of the day, different days of the week, all through the year. And so this was a possible schedule of events for September back in 2007 or 2008. What we also wanted to do from the beginning was make the fact that there's, like I said, a 3-dimensional park above visible in as many ways as possible. And so this is a view up along Fremont Street, First Street, looking up to the park from the street below. What you can see is the urban forest up there, but what you also can see now that it's quite populated are people moving back and forth across, and a variety of plant life changing, growing, blooming, throughout the year. So this is a diagram of the entire park along its length. In blue are all of the skylights that punctuate the park level and bring natural light into the building. In light green are all of the ways up from the street level. There are stairs, there are elevators, and there are escalators. And there are 2 streets that run underneath the building. First Street, which is the street we were looking at in the image a few moments ago, and Fremont Street. And both of those streets have sidewalks, city sidewalks, that also run under the building. And the elevators here open out directly onto those city sidewalks. There's also a public alleyway that runs through the city that goes underneath the building with an elevator that opens out directly onto that public walk, as well as sidewalks at the 2 ends of the buildings, again, that have elevators that open out directly onto that sidewalk. So our goal was to make this as connected as possible in many different ways. And because it's so long, it's 1,500 feet long, about a 1/4 mile long, we wanted to have as many ways to get up to the park, from the city as possible from the first day. We can also see here the gondola location. One of the competition ideas was to make a gondola that was moving like a funicular from the ground level up to the park level. Not because that's the fastest way, but because it's an exciting way to get up and down, a way that people walking on the street, on Mission Street to the north, could see and would see that there's a park above and a way to get there. And then lastly, in yellow, what you see are the connections that are bridge connections to new buildings. In the competition, this tower, Salesforce Tower, was a site that was part of the competition, as well as the transit center site. And our team proposed that the 5th floor of this tower would be connected directly to the central space of the park with a bridge. That would mean that the 6,000 people in the office here every day above the 5th floor would be able to come down and walk directly out onto the park. We also proposed that there be future connections at future building sites for these new buildings to bridge directly onto the park. And all of those bridge connections have been realized or are in the process of being realized today. Like I said, when we looked at the reference of Golden Gate Park, that long, skinny format of the park means that it runs through a series of different kinds of spaces and characters along its length. And that was what we modeled here, where the 1 city block wide cross section, which is about 150 feet wide by 1,500 feet long, means that people aren't going to all be in one space. You can't have a giant concert and have everyone, be at the same concert because they're so far away from each other because it's long and skinny. So rather than make it a big gathering space, like a field, we proposed making it a series of different medium-scaled spaces that change along the length. The central space is the main plaza and cafe, which is paved and open for activities and socialization and use, and that connects directly to the tower that's adjacent to it. And the elevator from the Grand Hall and the escalators from the Grand Hall come up to both sides. So that's the sort of social center of the park, with additional more populated areas and less populated areas running out from there, with a picnic meadow, a big lawn moving further to the west, and then more passive spaces, a restaurant within the park, and then an amphitheater space at the far western end. While there's other ecological gardens, and then a wetland garden that was designed to treat gray water from the building at the far eastern end. What you can see in this section below is that our design proposal was meant to create a place that really felt like you arrive in a landscape rather than on a roof deck, rather than on a roof. While it is elevated, we wanted the arrival there to feel like you were enveloped in landscape. And to do that, we proposed a rolling landscape, sort of a topography that's made out of grass and planting and glass in the case of the skylights. The reason that we also looked at this topographical design was because buses come beneath the park and drive around the entire building and pull into their bays just below. So because of that, all of the escalators and elevators and skylights need to run down the center space because the buses are driving around the outside edge. And so the topography and the rolling hills of our design are able to roll over some of the elevator head houses, some of the staircase pop-ups, so that instead of looking like a roof with a lot of architectural elements that pop up above, it looks like a landscape that has an undulation to it, and you don't see all of these mechanical or architectural pop-ups like you would if it were a flat design. And so here you can see from our design process, all of those elements popping up above the flat deck if we would have made this a flat park, and then how the rolling hills cover over some of those things on the right side of this image. The rolling hills and the overall landscape design was also conceived as a living landscape meant to support trees and shrubs, animals and plants for many decades, into the future. And so to do that, we wanted to maximize the amount of soil, the volume of soil, and ensure, positive drainage, but also balance the weight related to the technical constraints, of the structure. To do that, we developed this cross-section, which I'll describe a little bit, which is showing that there's connected soil that runs, the length of the park, so that all of the trees are able to interknit their roots while also maintaining drainage. At the bottom of that section is the tray that holds up the entire park. It's about 4.5 or 5 feet below the main park level, and it's sloped to drain along 2 lines that run the length of the park. Above that, we built up areas to contain the walkways and areas to receive large trees initially, and also use geosynthetic fill or styrofoam to fill in areas between the deep spaces where the larger root balls needed to be set with the trees. And on top of that, we have contiguous and continuous soil that connects together across the entire park. And you can see that in those 2 layers. And so there's deeper areas around the trees, not because the trees need 4.5 feet of depth or 5 feet of depth, but because when they're grown off-site in nurseries here in California, they're grown in deep boxes. In a forest, the trees really grow and their roots grow in about 2 to 3 feet or up to 1 meter or less of soil in depth, but they grow very wide. When they're grown in a nursery in California, since they're grown in boxes, they make those boxes deeper to give these trees more soil depth. I mean, not soil depth, but more volume. And so to accommodate the trees that we were able to buy, in California, we made deeper spaces, but then allowed and created ways to connect those roots and allow them larger soil volumes by creating a connected soil matrix across the entire park. And then planting the understory plants, the other vegetation above that. So across the entire park, we have about 3 feet average of soil over the entire park, but that depth varies from 4.5 or 5 feet, like I said, to 1.5 feet in the shallowest areas where we're planting lawn or ground cover or perennials. But like I also said, all of this is connected so tree roots can spread across the extents. So what you see here are the diagrams that relate to the park that we've developed. A topographical landscape with flat areas at the center around the plaza and the picnic meadow, with more topographical and rolling spaces in the mounded landscapes at either end. What that means in the second image is that places for active recreation, performances, gathering, games on the lawn, light sports and recreation all happen in the flatter spaces. Whereas, reading a book, listening to music in the park, on your headphones, walking through landscape areas and gardens happens in these blue areas at the 2 ends. And then at the far western end, we have the amphitheater, which can be programmed both for performances, but also because it's a rather flat lawn space, it can also and has been being used for exercise and for recreational activities there. One of the other main goals, connecting again back to the idea of plant collections and the Victorian history of San Francisco, was that we wanted this to be sort of a mini botanical gardens in the center of the city that would be easily accessible for everyone, anyone, in the area, so that the general public might be more exposed to a variety of different kinds of plants and the wonders of nature. And what we proposed was that this botanical garden would be specifically focused on plants that are acclimated to San Francisco and Northern California, but also the specific climate of the roof, and the urban environment that we're in. We also worked with Ned Kahn, an environmental artist, in the competition to develop an integrated concept for an environmental art piece. And he proposed what he called the bus jet fountain, which was intended to be a series of jets that were triggered by the buses moving one level below, on the bus deck level below the park. And it was designed so that the buses, like in an old gas station where you drive over a pneumatic tube and it makes a bell ding, you know, when the cars drive over them, he had proposed that the buses would drive over a pipe which would shoot a jet of water up on the park above. And so the buses would then be registered in their movement at the park level. Ultimately, we developed this with him so that they don't drive over this pipe, because that would be something that wouldn't last for decades, but instead there are sensors in the roof of the bus deck level that sense the buses as they move through from above. And we have them spaced at about 4 or 5 feet each across the roof. So as the bus moves, it triggers about 8 to 10 of these at one time. So that 8 to 10 jets shoot off at the speed that buses move down the length of the bus deck. So people at the park level see the movement of the buses, and they see this line of water jets run, you know, down the quarter-mile length of the park. Kids can chase these, parents can walk or chase them too, and we've been seeing that happening all the time now. What we also proposed was that while the center of the park is conceived as the social side of the park, the place where the people arrive, where they spend their time, we also looked at the outer edge of the park as a sort of botanical habitat edge. And on the top, this image was one of the competition images that was used as part of our submission, where we imagined that that dark green edge in the diagram below could be something that's rich with all variety of plants that are both focused on the special kinds of feature gardens that we were designing, but also on creating habitat for the flying members of the San Francisco community. And in the competition, we also thought that we might be able to bring in some fish. The fish didn't make it, nor did large, natural water features, but all of these other flying creatures have been seen at the park quite regularly today. Around the outer edge, we focused on feature gardens with plants that were specifically suited and are specifically suited to our climate, with a really large California garden on the northern side, as well as a desert garden at the far western end, a South African garden, an Australian garden, a Mediterranean garden, as well as gardens focused on specific types of plants, a prehistoric garden related to plants that grew in the time of the dinosaurs, and a wetland garden, plants that grow in wet soil, and that was designed to be in a constructed wetland that could also treat the gray water that comes from the building. This is the gray water wetland garden, a garden that was designed as a subsurface wetland where water from the restrooms in the transit center below is pumped up and polished below the surface within the gravel of the substrate. That water is polished in that substrate and then drained and held in a cistern below where it can be reused in the toilets and urinals of the bathrooms within the building. And this was all described here in another interpretational sign describing that cycle of water within the building and within the garden. And while you don't see water here, what you really do see are plants that thrive in water and that feel like they're growing around water. And what we've also heard is people talking about all the different plants that they see as they move around. And what we wanted to do was make gardens that really highlighted different moments in time so that there would always be something for people to be surprised by when they come at different times of the year. Here you can see an image from during construction of the buildup taking place. In white is the geofoam, the styrofoam that is the lightweight fill that's held below much of the soil. And you can see the trees being set in those larger pits within the foam spaces. This image shows the same area from the other side, looking back after the top layers of soil have been installed. And so this is at the picnic meadow, or the future picnic meadow, with the palm garden on the right, the ring of palms around the skylight to the bus deck level in the middle, and one of the rolling hills in the lawn on the left. And this is just after final installation of the turf prior to opening day, with the palm garden just after installation from the same location. Ultimately, you can see it here when it was completed, really sitting in the middle of this very built up neighborhood. You can see how dense it is. There's still one space left in the lower left of the left image, which is under construction today, where a new tower is coming up. That's the Parcel F tower. That tower will have a bridge that comes directly onto the park. SALESFORCE Tower bridges directly onto the park, and 181 Fremont bridges right onto the park. So over 10,000 people that spend their day above the park can come out onto the park, and then infinite number of people can come up onto the park from the city streets below. And here you can see on the right, looking down at dusk, down the length of the park from the western end. This is an image above the plaza with gathering happening, and the skylight, the light column on the right side that runs down to the Grand Hall, with a flush skylight that allows natural light over the escalators that pick people up in the Grand Hall and go up through every level to the left and let people out here on the far left of the image, which is at the children's garden, the play area to the south, and the bus jet fountain you can see running along to the north. The skylights are flush and actually act as paving within the center of the stone paved plaza. So within that plaza, we have cobblestone paving and glass paving. The glass paving means that people's shadows project below, and you can see them from the Grand Hall below. This is an image of the half-mile loop walk that runs around the park with the plant rail and benches set in. In the mornings, people jog on this path, as in the evenings. Throughout the day, people spend time walking and having walking meetings. And this is a calm family watching the water rather than running after the bus jet fountain and the buses as they move down the park. This is the picnic meadow. And in San Francisco, we have a lot of fog. We knew and felt that people really want sun in San Francisco, and we were concerned that maybe we're planting too many trees. As it happens, because of the reflected sun, like I said, coming off of the glass, as well as the natural sunlight coming onto the park, it ends up quite warm. And so the people, as you can see, really appreciate the shade of the trees here. And another view of the hill rolling up in that picnic meadow area. And here's an example where you can see, sunlight. We're looking south. This shadow is coming from the actual shadow cast, by the sun against the tree. But you can see that the tree's trunk is lit up right here. That's because of a reflected light coming from behind us off of one of the buildings. This is the amphitheater lawn with the amphitheater stage to the right, but as you can see, it's used for yoga and other kinds of physical activity throughout the week and throughout the day. And the idea of having programming as a main part of the identity of the park is something that has been realized. We've been working with a group, Biederman Redevelopment, Ventures that has worked, hard to develop a schedule of events and programs that happen throughout the day and throughout the week all year long. And here you can see some of those activities for kids, for adults, performances, and active exercise classes. And this one here is happening on top of the glass paving in the center of the plaza. Here's a normal day at lunchtime on the left with kiosks and cafe tents on the plaza, as well as a special event on the right with a performance. Again, that's happening on top of the glass paving. There have even been dance classes and discos that happen there in the plaza, and that's what you can see happening here. This is an image on the left, from on the plaza during, I think this was a salsa class, and the same moment, we have an image on the right from inside the building at the Grand Hall. And I think that this is something that, what we wanted to do was really create places and spaces for people to really be surprised, be attracted, and, caught by the things going on up on the park, so that they would come there. What we also wanted to do was use, like I said, the planting both as a feature and an attraction for people, but also as an attractor for the flying members of the San Francisco community. And these are some of all of the species that we've seen there since it was built. It's a major, hummingbird attraction in the city. There are hummingbirds, multiple hummingbirds, and nests of 4 hummingbirds along the length of the park, as well as butterflies, other birds, and bees are all, happily coexisting with the people there. We planted many weird and unusual plants. And one thing that you can hear, every time you go to the park are the people that are walking around along that path, remarking about the different plants, the different trees, and the different moments and special things that they see. And this is the silhouette of the plants planted behind this glass scrim, which stops water from overspaying from the bus deck level, but also is a screen that highlights the form of those different plants planted behind. Our fog and wind garden with plants, suited to the fog also has some that look like fog, pushing through the plant rail below. And then all kinds of flowers and leaf shapes and change, happen throughout the year. And, it's been something that, has been really a surprise at how excited people are about the plants, all different kinds of people, people that I think came, some of them to see plants, but many who just come there and then end up being focused on the plant life. And all of these plants have been thriving. And it seems, like I said, that people really do like them. Some of them, they like them a lot, as you can see in the lower right. So I think that brings us to the end of this presentation of our rooftop park. Like I said, we work all over the world, but I think this has been incredibly special to be working so long on a place that's right in our own, backyard, front yard. Being able to be part of the growth of the city and design and install, a place that also will continue to change over the years, and over the decades, but hopefully become someplace and stay someplace that's loved and used by the people of San Francisco is something that means a lot, to me, but also to everyone in our office. It's a place that we're happy to keep up with and checking in on, and also thinking about as we move to other places and other designs. So I'll say thank you very much. Again, I'm sorry I'm not able to be there with you live, but hopefully if I can make it next year to this conference next year, I'll see you in Jerusalem. Thanks very much.